The girl stares at her phone in disbelief, a quiet tapping sound echoing in the staircase. A screen notification delivers a shocking game over message, revealing a lethal encounter with a germophobic man. She collapses onto the stairs with a frustrated scream, baffled by the bizarre character settings of the game. The scene shifts as the black-haired man in uniform turns his head with a cold, questioning gaze. The pink-haired girl tries to hide her disgust as the man asks if he was summoned. She stands frozen in the hallway, her wide blue eyes reflecting sudden confusion and shock. A moment of tense proximity passes as she remains silent beside the imposing man in the corridor. Memories of a previous life surface, filled with the crushing weight of unmet expectations and deep sorrow. Scenes of domestic verbal abuse and social isolation illustrate her lonely struggle to find a sense of belonging. Sobbing quietly, she wonders if a digital world is the only place she might finally find some happiness. She looks with resentment at the man she considers the most arrogant character in the entire game. Blinding headlights signify a tragic end as she realizes too late that a car is rushing toward her. The shattered screen of her phone lies in the dark, signaling the end of her modern existence. Awakening in a lavish bed, the girl with long pink hair realizes she has somehow survived the accident. Confusion turns to alarm as she touches her face, struggling to comprehend her new, unfamiliar reality. A mirror confirms the impossible truth. She has possessed the body of a character within her favorite game. Desperate for answers, she frantically searches the room to uncover any information about her new identity. Looking at her reflections back, she begins to piece together the life of the girl she now inhabits. She examines her hands, pondering the strange and uncontrollable powers associated with her role as a guide. Memories of the world's mechanics reveal the physical connection required for a guide to stabilize an esper. She feels with newfound determination, she resolves to build a life free from the constraints of the main story. She sparkles with joy, viewing this unexpected rebirth as a divine opportunity to finally be truly happy. Her excitement vanishes instantly upon discovering that the character Rose Valentine possesses absolutely no wealth or status. Reality hits hard as she finds an empty ledger, realizing her new life starts with zero funds. A grueling cycle of job applications and interviews begins as she fights to survive the cost of living crisis. Success brings a radiant smile as Rose proudly displays her new employee badge, securing a home and meals. While drafting her plans, she decides to keep her identity as a guide a closely guarded secret. She dreams of a peaceful future where she can find a kind partner and live comfortably. Her daydreams are interrupted by a sudden call, signaling the arrival of a new, unexpected variable. A blonde woman scolds her relentlessly for leaving the bathroom floor wet, forcing Rose to apologize. The woman's intense anger leaves Rose feeling small and intimidated in their shared living quarters. Rose realizes with awe that she is living with Irene, the actual heroine of the game. A vision of beauty and grace, Irene stands surrounded by flowers, looking every bit the perfect protagonist. Rose bows deeply, hoping to stay on the good side of the surreal figure standing before her. Irene's facade cracks as she snaps at Rose, demanding more care and attention to detail. Every late arrival home becomes a source of dread as Irene waits to deliver a harsh lecture. Even the smallest noise is met with a piercing glare that makes the atmosphere incredibly tense. Rose cowers in fear, unable to tell if her beautiful roommate is truly a heroine or a villain. Tears of frustration well up as she laments the unexpected suffering of her new, supposedly simple life. Panic sets in as Rose rushes through the garden, terrified of Irene's reaction to her tardiness. Standing before the dorms, she hesitates, already hearing the echoes of the inevitable shouting match awaiting her. Tired of walking on eggshells, she pauses outside the door, dreading the confrontation with her roommate. A soft sound accompanies her decision to wait in the shadows until Irene finally falls asleep. Wandering through the moonlit garden, the cool breeze begins to soothe her frayed nerves and anxiety. A sudden rustling sound in the foliage breaks the quiet, putting her immediately on high alert. Fear grips her as she scans the darkness, wondering if a dangerous mutant has breached the perimeter. She spots a figure leaning against a tree, gasping as a man struggles to remain standing. Relief washes over her as she realizes it is a person, not a monster, lurking in the night. Seeing the handsome man panting in the moonlight, Rose contemplates whether to approach her ideal type. Rose gazes down with a hesitant expression, her mind clouded by uncertainty as she watches the man struggle. The black-haired man collapses with a heavy sound, prompting Rose to cautiously approach him with concern. Gasping with an audible "ha," the man struggles for breath as Rose realizes something is deeply wrong. Panic sets in as Rose rushes toward the fallen figure, her voice shaking as she asks if he is okay. Kneeling beside him, Rose urgently checks for injuries while the man gasps in obvious physical distress. Identifying his uniform, Rose realizes the man is an Esper suffering from a terrifying and dangerous ability rampage. A grim vision illustrates the massive destruction that will occur if the man's power remains unchecked for much longer. Overwhelmed by fear, Rose wonders what she can possibly do to stop the impending disaster by herself. Rose suddenly remembers her own identity as a guide, realizing she finally holds the power to help him. She reaches out tentatively, questioning if she can successfully guide him after hiding her abilities for so long. The man continues to groan with a pained ugh, his sweating face reflecting his intense internal suffering. Rose resolves to act immediately, focusing her energy as she firmly places her hands on the man's back. A brilliant flare of light signals the start of the guiding process as Rose channels her power into him. Relief washes over Rose as she feels the guiding connection begin to take effect on the struggling man. The man's hand suddenly grips her arm in a tight hold, surprising her with his renewed, sudden strength. Rose is pulled into an intense embrace, trying to calm the man despite her own growing confusion. He tilts her head up, a tense and silent moment passing between them in the quiet, moonlit garden. Shock leaves Rose speechless as the man suddenly leans in and initiates a deep, forceful kiss. Her eyes go wide with disbelief as the surreal moment unfolds, the world around them blurring away. The man exhales a soft ha as they kiss, his volatile energy beginning to stabilize through her touch. Rose struggles to find words, her attempt to speak cut short by the man's overwhelming and sudden proximity. She notices blood on his lip, realizing the encounter has become physically intense and unexpectedly painful. Pulling back with a flushed face, Rose is mortified by the sudden and shocking turn of events. Rose apologizes frantically, checking on his condition while trying to process the meaning of that unexpected kiss. The man stares at her with glowing red eyes, his expression far more focused than it was before. He insists he is fine and asks her to continue, leaving Rose in a state of absolute panic. Rose tries to stall, but the man pulls her hand close as if he is desperate for her touch. She suggests calling the director for help, but the man seems completely fixated on her alone right now. His incredible strength makes it impossible for her to pull away, leaving her trapped firmly in his grasp. Rose looks at him with utter bewilderment, unable to understand the man's sudden and demanding behavior. The man's tone becomes pleading as he asks for more guiding, showing a vulnerable side to her. Rose is stunned that he is now asking for permission, reconsidering his previous, more forceful actions. Seeing his fragile state, Rose gently cradles the man's face as he leans into her hand. She finally agrees to guide him, resolve showing in her eyes as she accepts the difficult task. The man continues to pant heavily, his flushed face revealing the physical cost of the ongoing rampage. Rose continues the guiding kiss, reflecting on how quickly her simple life has changed this night. She gasps as she accidentally brushes against the cut on his lip during their intense proximity. The intimate act serves as a necessary measure to prevent a catastrophic and deadly ability rampage. They remain locked in a desperate embrace as the garden blooms around them in the soft moonlight. A sudden realization strikes Rose, causing her to pull back with a shocked and startled expression. She panics upon remembering they are outdoors, vulnerable to anyone who might happen to walk by. Fears of a ruined social reputation haunt her as she imagines the cruel gossip that would follow. Rose tries to bid him farewell, but the man remains unwilling to let go of her waist. She pleads with him to release her, promising that help for an Esper is surely on the way. The man lets out a frustrated "huh," looking wounded as she continues to resist his persistent hold. He gazes at her with deep concern, seemingly worried about their sudden and forced separation. Rose gives him one final quick kiss before successfully pulling herself away from his grasp. She says her goodbyes in a rush, desperate to escape before her social reputation is compromised. Rose runs into the distance, her pink hair trailing behind as the man watches her flee. The scene shifts to show a blonde man and a short-haired woman, illustrating the importance of satisfaction during guiding. Rose reflects on the previous night's kiss, admitting it felt good and suggesting they share high compatibility. A shimmering vision illustrates the guiding sensation, feeling like clear spring water flowing wherever their skin touched. Touching her lips, Rose wonders with a hopeful expression if she will ever see the handsome man again. Rose sparkles with joy, daydreaming that the man might seek her out once he recovers his senses. A sudden collision in a crowded hall breaks her trance as the blonde Irene scolds Rose for being clumsy. Rose winces in pain while Irene notes the overwhelming crowd filling the center despite everyone's exhaustion today. Rose taps a man on the shoulder to ask about the commotion, drawing his attention in the lobby. Men gossip about an S-rank Esper who lost control last night and was mysteriously subdued by a guide. Rose recalls her intimate embrace with the stranger, realizing with a blush that the gossip is definitely about her. Disbelief fills Rose's wide blue eyes as she processes the terrifying revelation that the man was an S rank. Narration reveals there are only 4 S rank espers, describing the man as having hair darker than the night. Realization dawns on Rose as she identifies the specific man among the Elite 4 who fits that dark description. A striking portrait of Claude Dunhart reveals his intense gaze and the small, lingering cut on his lip. Panic strikes as Rose identifies Claude Dunhart as the worst and most dangerous villain in the entire game. The scene shifts to the main hall, where Claude stands prominently, surrounded by a crowd of curious onlookers. Claude dismisses another potential candidate, his sharp tone reflecting his growing frustration with the search for his guide. From a distance, Claude spots Rose and Irene, questioning why they have been loitering there since the morning. Rose is in awe of Irene's composure, noting that she remains completely unfazed by the presence of Claude. Rose experiences a wave of regret, horrified that she failed to recognize the world's most dangerous villain last night. The security guard bows deeply as Claude's subordinate questions him about the identity of the person from last night. The guard nervously apologizes, explaining he couldn't see the guide's face clearly as they fled past the curfew. Sweating with fear, the guard explains the person vanished so fast he couldn't tell if they were human. Claude's glowing red eye narrows as he questions how the guard could possibly miss seeing the guide's features. An oppressive, dark aura radiates from Claude as he delivers a chilling threat to the terrified security guard. Rose flinches as the heavy atmosphere reminds her of the immense danger she faces if her identity is revealed. Terror grips Rose as she realizes the powerful and vengeful Claude is actively hunting for her right now. Narration explains Claude's special status as the game's final boss and a legendary national hero of Arteon. A flashback depicts the 3 other S-rank espers who awakened as adults, contrasting them with Claude's unique history. A young Claude is shown, highlighting his early awakening and the weight of his long-standing, formidable reputation. Standing over a destroyed city, the adult Claude is established as the leader of S-ranks and Arteon's absolute justice. Rose realizes that if such a powerful figure is hunting her, she will eventually be caught despite her efforts. A vision of their kiss is juxtaposed with Claude's bloodstained past, emphasizing the grave mistake Rose made. Irene scoffs at the mystery guide's perceived stupidity for creating such a mess by not identifying herself. Irene argues that identifying simple traits like hair color would have allowed the center to find the guide easily. Rose panics internally, wondering if Claude's memory was truly distorted enough by his rampage to forget her features. Bystanders speculate that Claude must have been hallucinating, while Rose watches the unfolding scene with growing anxiety. An educational graphic explains that sensory distortion during a rampage can make an esper mistake an elephant for a squirrel. Rose clutches her head in despair, lamenting that her vibrant pink hair is far too distinctive to be forgotten. Rose attempts to pull Irene away, but she is interrupted by a sudden, authoritative voice claiming responsibility. A brown-haired girl with glasses and pigtails steps forward, approaching Claude with a determined and humble expression. The girl in the plaid apron pleads for forgiveness, boldly claiming she is the one Claude has been searching for. Rose watches in stunned silence, baffled that a complete stranger is stepping up to lie in her place. The girl boldly insists she guided Claude yesterday, leaving the crowd and a confused Rose in absolute disbelief. Blushing intensely, the pigtailed girl's reaction makes Rose wonder if the stranger actually harbors romantic feelings for Claude. Rose reflects on Claude's hidden, violent nature, knowing he is capable of snapping someone's neck when truly annoyed. The stranger stands before Claude, unaware of the lethal danger she is inviting by claiming Rose's secret actions. Claude coldly dismisses the girl's claim, calling her lie too clumsy and pathetic to even warrant an answer. Rose gasps as Claude's sharp gaze suddenly shifts, locking eyes with her across the crowded lobby. Rose feels a sudden, intense surge of guiding energy, suggesting someone has finally recognized her hidden abilities. Fear strikes Rose as she realizes her guiding power may have accidentally leaked, exposing her true nature to Claude. Rose wakes up with a start, her hand to her chest as she processes a vivid and unsettling dream. Irene interrupts Rose's thoughts, warning her that they will be late for the center's upcoming mock training session. Claude Dunhart sits with an imposing presence, his sharp gaze and refined attire commanding absolute attention and respect. Rose freezes in place, horrified to find herself in the same room as the dangerous man she encountered last night. Irene notes Claude's intense glare, while a panicked Rose tries to dismiss the observation as a mere trick of imagination. Claude's glowing red eyes remain fixed and cold, his expression unreadable yet undeniably menacing as he watches the room. Educational graphics illustrate the rigors of mock training, where espers learn to combat mutants alongside their assigned guides. Claude observes the training with a detached, superior air, his presence likened to a professor joining an undergraduate project. Irene calls out to Rose, who remains in a state of shock over Claude's unexpected and overwhelming proximity today. Irene teases Rose about the intense atmosphere, while Rose internally panics about the painful secret they shared. Exhausted and anxious, Rose leans against a table, already planning her escape through a transfer or immediate vacation days. A sudden call for Roji snaps the pink-haired Rose back to attention as she clutches her documents tightly. The instructor assigns newly arrived guides to teams, ignoring the fact that one team already has its full complement. Rose's heart sinks as she realizes with utter shock that she has been placed directly into Claude's training group. A sharp creak sounds as Rose's heart races, her mind filled with absolute terror at the thought of facing Claude. Intense combat unfolds during the mock training, with an Esper unleashing a powerful strike against a massive hulking mutant. Claude watches the display with glowing red eyes, seemingly unimpressed and bored by the amateur performance before him. Claude harshly rejects an offer of assistance from other Espers, coldly ordering them to get out of his way. A close-up of Claude's face highlights his sharp features and the cold, unyielding intensity of his crimson eyes. Rose finds Claude's arrogant behavior at a training session for beginners to be completely ridiculous and unnecessarily excessive. Other girls gush over Claude's rank and looks, though one notes his trash personality balances out his perfect face. Gossiping guides discuss Claude's search for the mysterious person who saved him from his previous deadly ability rampage. They speculate that only high-ranking guides like Shauna or Razne could possibly be the legendary one he seeks. A shimmering portrait depicts the dark-haired Razni and purple-haired Shayna, the perceived elite candidates for Claude Dunhart. Balan, a purple-haired Esper, mocks Claude behind his back, calling him a defective and lonely man who lacks a guide. Balan boasts about his own inner strength, claiming he is superior to those who rely solely on their rank. A guide with a ponytail threatens to report Balan for harassment if he continues his disrespectful and arrogant behavior. Balan is stunned into silence after being reminded that he failed to achieve the elite status of an S rank. Turning his rage on the guide, Balan insults her and compares her looks to the perfection of an S rank. Enraged and insulted, Balan yells at the woman for daring to mock a powerful and high-ranking Esper like him. Another man tries to restrain the furious Balan, urging him to cool down before his temper causes real trouble. Narration describes the high social standing of Espers, who are publicly revered for their incredible powers and heroic status. A shimmering portrait shows a blonde man and a purple-haired woman, representing the ideal and successful Esper-guide partnership. A fuming Balan watches with jealousy as other Espers receive praise and attention from their respective guides. Rose looks on with concern, her profile reflecting a deep worry about the unstable and aggressive individuals around her. Balan approaches Rose with a suspicious look, questioning what she is writing so seriously in her notes during training. Rose lets out a weary sigh, her frustration with Balan's constant interruptions and arrogance clearly showing on her face. Balan looms over Rose aggressively, his anger flaring as he feels ignored by someone he deems a mere guide. He sneers at Rose, calling her a useless, ordinary human, and questioning what gives her the confidence to act. A small flame ignites in Balan's palm, a dangerous and unauthorized display of power intended to intimidate the defenseless Rose. Balan steps closer with a menacing grin, holding his fiery power dangerously close to Rose's panicked face. Rose trembles with fear, pleading for the madman to calm down as she holds her folder close to her. Narration explains that in a world of monsters, powerless humans remain at the very bottom of the food chain. Bystanders watch the confrontation with amusement, considering the cruel assault on a non-ability user to be a fun show. Rose is paralyzed by the cruel reality that she is considered powerless and expendable in this harsh, ability-driven society. A terrified "Kiak!" escapes Rose as the flames lick the air around her, the heat becoming dangerously unbearable. Balan prepares to strike again, a sphere of fire glowing in his hand as he mocks her perceived weakness. He stands over the fallen Rose, telling her to remember the greatness of an Esper through this painful lesson. Tears well in Rose's eyes as she looks back in desperation, wondering how she can possibly survive this assault. Shaking with terror, Rose realizes her legs won't move, leaving her trapped and unable to escape the madman's power. Balan's hand ignites with fire as he sneeringly warns the pink-haired Rose that her pitiful act won't save her. Rose watches in wide-eyed terror, her gaze fixed on the flickering flames as she wonders what will happen next. A sudden force seizes the purple-haired Balan, causing him to cry out in shock and demand to know who grabbed him. Boom! Balan is slammed violently into the ground, coughing up blood as a massive surge of purple energy overwhelms him. Bystanders stare in disbelief while Rose wonders who could have neutralized the aggressive Balan with such overwhelming ease. Claude stands in the shadows, his glowing hand revealing he was the one who effortlessly suppressed the arrogant Esper. Rose is baffled, wondering how Claude arrived at the rear so quickly after fighting the golem on the front lines. Looking down with cold indifference, Claude dismisses the fallen Balan as absolutely pathetic, his red eyes filled with disdain. Claude declares the training over and prepares to leave, but his sharp gaze lingers on Rose for a brief, tense moment. Claude orders the other Espers to take good care of Rose, leaving her stunned by his unexpected and authoritative command. Rose remains on the ground, surrounded by scattered documents, as she tries to process her narrow escape from the chaos. Rose reflects on the strange sequence of events, noting how Claude joined her group and even protected her from bullying. Rose notices sparkling dust on a rock, which her colleague explains is golem dust, a clear mark of Claude's power. Panicking, Rose worries about getting on Claude's bad side, fearing she might end up pulverized like his enemies. Rose recalls how Claude previously humiliated Balan, realizing the S-rank hero possesses a truly ruthless and vengeful nature. Balan struggles to his feet, fuming with jealousy and rage as the others prepare to return without him. Rose suddenly looks back, her expression shifting to one of confusion as a strange sound echoes behind her. Losing all restraint, the enraged Balan screams at Rose, demanding to know if she is still watching his humiliation. Balin vows to crush everyone under falling rocks, his mind warped by a desperate need for petty and violent revenge. Boom! Balan unleashes a massive, reckless blast of energy while a colleague carries Rose away from the growing danger. The cave begins to groan and crack, and Rose realizes with horror that the entire structure is about to collapse. A desperate voice orders everyone to take cover as a shadowy figure is engulfed in a swirling, intense crimson aura. Driven by pure madness, Balan screams for everyone to die as he continues his reckless assault on the group. Claude appears before the rampaging Balan, coldly ordering him to shut up as purple energy begins to suppress the area. Balan struggles against an invisible pressure, shouting for the S-rank to let go as he remains trapped by Cloud's power. Claude stares at his glowing palm, observing Balan's lack of control with a detached, judgmental, and highly superior air. Thud. Balan collapses to the floor, completely neutralized and unconscious, after Claude effortlessly snuffs out his reckless power. Rose watches in stunned silence, finally witnessing the true, terrifying scale of power held by an elite S-rank Esper. A colleague warns that the ground is weakening and urgently asks if anyone has an escape scroll for the group. Rose confirms she has a scroll, but pleads for the man to put her down so she can find it. Rose freezes in panic as she realizes her scroll only covers 10 people, but their group currently has 12 members. Looking around desperately, Rose asks if any Esper has a teleportation ability to accommodate the extra people in danger. Rose's eyes light up with sudden hope as she realizes there is one person present who can solve their problem. Claude stands silently with his arms crossed, his unreadable and imposing presence causing the surrounding guides to gasp in surprise. Claude closes his eyes, seemingly annoyed by the delay as the group waits for his decision on how to proceed. Rose protests as a man takes her documents, but he insists that safely returning the guides is their top priority. A firm hand grabs the escape scroll from the pile, signaling that their plan for their departure is finally moving forward. The man orders the group to hold the unconscious Balan tight, preparing to activate the scroll and teleport them away. Rose bursts into tears, terrified at the prospect of being left alone in the collapsing cave with the monster Claude. Thump. Rose falls to her knees as the teleportation light vanishes, realizing she has been left behind just as she feared. Rose laments her cruel fate, crying about being abandoned by the others who even took the injured Balan with them. A subtle smirk plays on Claude's lips as he reflects on the fearful words Rose shouted just moments before. Claude towers over the sobbing Rose, mockingly asking if her comment about the monster was truly meant for him. Rose freezes in absolute horror, her wide blue eyes fixed on the imposing Claude as she realizes her massive mistake. Rose's eyes fill with tears as she begs for forgiveness, cowering before the annoyed and formidable S-rank Esper. Claude turns to walk away while the pink-haired Rose desperately pleads for him to wait and take her along. Rose's internal narrator emphasizes the gravity of her slip of the tongue before the world's most dangerous and powerful man. A sudden crash echoes through the cave as debris begins to fall, causing Rose to let out a terrified scream. In a moment of pure desperation, Rose lunges forward and clings to Claude's arm, hiding her face against him. Claude's red eyes flare with sudden rage as he demands to know how she dares to touch his body. Claude pushes Rose away as the cave structure continues to groan and crumble dangerously behind them. Rose is offended that the perfectionist Claude immediately brushes off the spot where her hand touched his uniform. A vision of a romantic embrace contrasts sharply with Rose's current fear that Claude intends to abandon her. Determined to survive the collapse, a tearful Rose vows that she will find a way to escape with him. Rose points an accusatory finger, warning the black-haired Claude that he will regret leaving the one who guided him. Claude looms over Rose with glowing red eyes, threatening that he will not spare her if she is lying. Rose realizes her anger flared too much, but she remains resolute in her desperate attempt to secure her safety. Elsewhere, a blonde woman confronts two men who offer weak, sweating excuses for a situation that clearly angers her. The blonde woman's face is etched with worry as she calls out Rose's name while searching the facility. Thump! The pink-haired Rose falls to the ground, crying out as she is reunited with her frantic, calling colleague. The blonde woman gasps in horror, cradling Rose's face and noting that she looks terribly disfigured from her ordeal. Claude interrupts the reunion, coldly ordering Rose to stop wasting time and speak to him at once. The blonde woman glares at Claude, firmly telling him to wait since Rose is clearly injured and needs rest. Claude remains indifferent to Rose's plight, stating he has a promise to keep, regardless of her current exhausted state. Rose tries to describe the mysterious guide she saw, remembering a tall figure with either brown or black hair. Claude stares at Rose with skeptical red eyes, questioning if that meager description is truly all she can provide. Flustered, Rose insists that even this much description should be more than enough to narrow down the search. Two men suddenly seize Rose from behind, causing her to cry out in confusion and alarm at their actions. Claude stares coldly, declaring that he cannot trust her words alone and requires a more direct identification process. Rose is led away by the two men under Claude's stern command to move the investigation elsewhere immediately. Hours pass as a dazed Rose sits in an office while being made to identify guides from various documents. Claude watches with crossed arms, ordering his subordinates to keep focusing as they continue the grueling identification task. Rose sighs in exhaustion, noting that despite hours of work, none of the brought-in guides match the mysterious person. Claude gestures toward the desk, noting that the man currently sitting before Rose is the very last potential candidate. Claude suggests the guide was an unregistered civilian, but a colleague argues that such a possibility is exceedingly low. Rose stands up in frustration, pleading to be released after spending days checking every possible guide in the center. Claude counters that she should have witnessed the event properly, earning him a silent, insulted glare from the girl. Rose snaps back, arguing that observing carefully was impossible under the life-threatening circumstances of the recent cave collapse. Claude points out Rose's lack of restraint while she desperately agrees to help further just to end the ordeal. A sudden arrival interrupts the tension, drawing the attention of both Claude and the weary, startled Rose. An ash-blonde man named Oscar enters the room, his bright and charming smile filling the space with warm energy. Oscar teases Claude about rumors of his madness and asks what could possibly be tormenting the great S-rank hero. Oscar looks over at Rose with a curious gaze, noting that this isn't the scene he expected to find. Rose blushes and greets Oscar timidly, her heart fluttering at the sight of the incredibly handsome new arrival. Oscar leans in and gently touches a lock of Rose's hair, complimenting its lovely pink color with a smile. Rose's eyes widen as she suddenly recognizes the man, remembering his specific role from the story she once read. Rose recalls that Oscar is a popular character known for his good-natured charm and handsome, popular appearance. In a playful chibi scene, Oscar teases Claude about hiding with a cutie, while the annoyed S-rank rejects him. Oscar kneels down to Rose's level, his gentle presence a stark contrast to Claude's cold and demanding nature. With a warm and polite tone, the ash-blonde man introduces himself to the pink-haired Rose as Oscar. Oscar extends his hand toward his chest, politely asking Rose if he may know her name in return. A radiant smile spreads across Rose's face as she introduces herself to Oscar as Rose Valentine. Oscar laughs softly and compliments Rose's name, calling it cute as she thanks him for the kind words. Claude stands behind the blonde woman, demanding Rose's name, while she looks back with a nervous, startled expression. Clinging to her folder, Rose laments her inability to even answer Claude properly, due to her overwhelming fear. Claude turns away with a dismissive air, leaving Rose to watch him with a mix of lingering fear. Rose is surprised by Oscar's friendly laughter, finding his approachable nature far more comforting than the S-rank's coldness. Oscar looks back with a cold, serious expression, confirming to someone off-screen that the girl is indeed a civilian. Rose is taken aback by Oscar's sudden shift in attitude as he complains about wasting his time on her. Oscar smiles dismissively, questioning why Claude is hanging around a non-ability user and wondering if she is his type. Oscar dismisses Rose as too plain to stand next to Claude, sparking her immediate and visible irritation. Rose suddenly notices Oscar's short brown hair, which perfectly matches her description of the mysterious, unknown guide. With a triumphant sparkle in her eyes, Rose confidently declares she has finally identified the guide they wanted. Claude and Oscar react with shock and skepticism as Rose makes her bold and highly unexpected identification. Claude glares at the pink-haired girl, sternly questioning if she is intentionally trying to deceive him with lies. Rose remains unfazed, offering a smug smile while insisting that her identification of the guide is completely accurate. Pointing dramatically, Rose accuses Oscar of being the very person who provided the guiding on that fateful day. Oscar looks stunned and begins to sweat nervously as Rose cites his short brown hair as undeniable proof. Oscar laughs nervously, stammering a quick denial to Claude about ever having guided him in the past. "Walk!" Oscar is violently blown backward as Claude coldly orders him to leave the room immediately. Claude clutches his head in visible agony while Rose watches with folded arms, satisfied by his obvious misery. Rose observes Claude with deep suspicion as he begins muttering incomprehensible and dark thoughts to himself. Claude speaks in a low, dazed voice about the past, leaving a confused Rose asking for immediate clarification. Surrounded by imaginary blossoms, Claude touches his face, haunted by the lingering and vivid memory of Rose's lips. Rose looks on as Claude turns away, visibly disturbed after hearing her detailed and blunt review of his lips. Rose continues her explanation, unaware of the deep psychological turmoil she is causing the brooding, dark-haired Esper. Rose playfully suggests that Claude should simply kiss Oscar to verify the guide's true identity once and for all. Declaring her task finished, Rose makes a swift and panicky exit to escape the increasingly awkward situation. A gentle hand shakes Rose awake as she groans, finally returning to consciousness after her long and exhausting ordeal. The blonde Irene looks down with deep concern, her angelic appearance being the first thing Rose sees upon waking. Irene scolds the chibi-style Rose for going missing, leaving the pink-haired girl feeling safe and greatly comforted. Rose recounts being used as a human detector, though she secretly worries about the massive lie she told Claude. Rose puts on a brave face, trying to convince herself that everything has been resolved nicely and is fine. Finding comfort in small things, Rose feels refreshed by the simple, fragrant scent of her clean school uniform. Irene remains skeptical of the supposed resolution, but her constant nagging is a welcome, familiar sound to Rose. Rose springs up with excitement at the mention of steak for lunch, much to Irene's visible annoyance. Hummed notes fill the air as Rose skips away happily, leaving Irene to call out after her in vain. Rose freezes in place, her heart sinking as she recognizes a familiar, cold voice calling out to her. Claude stands looming over Rose with crossed arms, radiating a terrifyingly dark and incredibly upset aura. Claude's red eyes flare with intensity as he accuses Rose of playing dangerous, deceptive games with him. Gasp! Rose imagines the horror of Claude and Oscar kissing, remembering the S-Rank's extreme hatred of physical contact. Claude stares intensely, his sharp gaze confirming he is absolutely certain that Oscar was not his secret guide. Claude demands the absolute truth, causing a tiny, trembling Rose to fear that her life is finally over. The vision of the kiss repeats as Rose realizes her suggestion was truly absurd given Claude's touch-averse nature. Claude's focus narrows on Rose as he struggles with the implications of her lies and his own memories. Rose cowers in fear, terrified by the disturbing possibility that Claude actually attempted to test her kissing theory. Desperate and tearful, Rose pleads her innocence, claiming that his current accusations are completely unfair and unearned. Claude coldly orders her to be quiet, trusting his instincts over her increasingly frantic and unreliable protestations. Rose recalls the original story's details, remembering that Claude suffers from a severe and painful guiding allergy. A vision of needles explains Claude's condition, where even the slightest guiding contact causes him immense physical pain. Rose realizes Claude's allergy makes physical contact impossible, planning to use this fact to escape his interrogation. Determined to prove her point, Rose proposes a high-stakes bet to the skeptical and imposing black-haired man. Rose stands her ground with renewed confidence, ready to manipulate the situation to ensure her own continued safety. Elsewhere, Oscar laughs as he is swarmed by female fans in the hallway, oblivious to the coming confrontation. Oscar turns with a curious expression as Rose approaches him, interrupting his popular and crowded social gathering. Surprised by the summon, Oscar notes that it is quite rare for Claude to seek him out first. A steady, rhythmic thud of footsteps echoes as the pair walks together through the facility's quiet hallway. Oscar teases Rose about her lack of a relationship with Claude, leaving the pink-haired girl flustered and defensive. Oscar observes Rose with a playful smile, mentioning that Claude has never been seen around women before now. Oscar laughs at the thought of Claude liking tiny girls, sparking a defensive reaction from the height-conscious Rose. Oscar approaches the surprised Rose with a playful smile, his bright ash-blonde hair catching the light in the hallway. Rose reflects on Oscar's sudden shift in attitude after discovering her civilian status, finding his behavior difficult to comprehend. In a playful chibi scene, Rose wonders how Oscar knew her thoughts, to which he replies that people say that often. Oscar laughs heartily as Rose feels a dizzying wave of annoyance, certain that he is the only one who doesn't understand. A sudden, heavy footstep sounds as Claude looms in the foreground, his presence immediately cutting through the pair's light-hearted chatter. Claude closes the distance, looming over Oscar with a dark intensity that makes the ash-blonde man stammer in confusion. Rose giggles while Claude demands to know why the two of them are standing so uncomfortably close to one another. Claude's expression remains cold as he reminds Rose that his very life depends on the high-stakes deal they made. Rose laughs behind her hand, satisfied to see the intimidating Claude and the popular Oscar caught in such an awkward confrontation. Oscar asks Claude if he was dragged into a weird bet, referring to the pink-haired girl as a tiny girl. Oscar continues to tease Rose by calling her Bean Girl, fueling her inner rage as she vows to stop his laughter. Claude stares out the window with his back turned, his voice dropping to a low, commanding tone as he orders silence. An uncomfortable silence falls over the kitchen area as the three of them stand together in a tense, motionless standoff. Oscar breaks the quiet, admitting that Claude's strange behavior is giving him goosebumps and asking if he can finally leave. Claude slowly adjusts his pristine white gloves, coldly stating that he brought Oscar there for a much more specific purpose. Oscar notes how much Claude used to loathe physical contact, making the black-haired man's current proximity even more suspicious and alarming. A sharp rustle sounds as Claude suddenly reaches out and grabs the collar of Oscar's green shirt with a gloved hand. Surrounded by a parodic aura of flowers, Claude leans in close to Oscar's face, leaving the ash-blonde man completely stunned. Walk! Oscar panics in a chibi scene, desperately pushing Claude away as the S-rank attempts to lean in for a kiss. Oscar yells in protest as Claude grips his face, frantically asking the black-haired man if he has eaten something weird. Rose watches the chaotic scene with a satisfied smile, thinking to herself that Oscar should have lived a nicer life. Oscar continues to struggle against Claude's grip, loudly declaring that he only provides guiding services to female espers. Screaming in terror, Oscar begs Claude to move his lips away as the dark-haired man continues his disturbing silent advance. Thud! Claude roughly shoves Oscar to the floor, unable to bring himself to follow through with Rose's absurd verification theory. Oscar sighs in immense relief while sitting on the floor, thankful that the horrifying ordeal has finally come to an end. Claude clutches his hand in frustration while Rose smugly concludes that she has won their bet since he couldn't do it. Rose looks down at the brooding Claude, noticing for the first time a hint of vulnerability beneath his usual cold exterior. A brown-haired man with glasses named Azir introduces himself as Rose's senior from the pharmacy department with a friendly smile. Azir explains to Rose that helping understaffed departments is a normal part of their work within the guide support department. Walking down the sterile facility hallway, Azir promises Rose that he will send her back quickly once they finish their task. Rose pauses to look at a mysterious door, asking Azir what lies behind it, prompted by her growing sense of curiosity. Azir looks back at Rose, informing her that the room belongs to a very important person who is visiting today. Rose hesitates at the threshold as Azir opens the door, questioning if she is even allowed to enter such a restricted area. Gasping in shock, Rose finds Claude lying in a hospital bed, looking pale and weakened as he struggles for breath. The dark and swirling patterns of the room reflect Rose's internal turmoil upon seeing the powerful S-rank in such a state. Rose peers closer at the sleeping Claude, wondering if the formidable man is truly unconscious despite his immense power. Azir playfully suggests that Rose should take the opportunity to get revenge on the sleeping Claude for all his recent bothering. Rose worries about the danger of waking him, but Azir dismissively assures her that Claude is far too deeply asleep. Claude remains motionless as Azir explains that a heavy dose of sleeping pills was administered to manage the disgusting guiding treatment. Rose clutches her folder, skeptical that simple sleeping pills could have such a profound effect on a high-ranking S-class esper. Azir shrugs his shoulders, admitting they have few options left to manage the intense physical toll of Claude's condition. A dark vision of a core exploding illustrates the terrifying reality that Claude's power will eventually destroy him without proper guiding. Claude is shown surrounded by a swirling purple aura, a man born with every gift of wealth and power imaginable. Rose finds it deeply ironic that the very power everyone envies is the same thing that is slowly killing him. Azir explains that survival is a constant struggle for Claude, though he immediately apologizes for sharing such grim details with Rose. Rose recalls a memory of Claude's hidden pain, realizing that the arrogant man has been harboring deep, life-threatening concerns all along. A vision of a building engulfed in flames serves as a grim reminder of the destruction Claude's previous rampages have caused. The horrific memory of the original story's massacre plays out, showing the fallen bodies of Irene and the other male leads. Looking at Claude with new eyes, Rose realizes she can no longer hate him if he is truly just as desperate. Claude looks up at Rose from his bed, his voice weak as he apologizes for running away and using his illness. Rose gently taps Claude's forehead, hoping the powerful man feels a bit better upon waking from his sleep. A faint glow emanates from Rose's fingertips as she makes brief, accidental guiding contact with the sleeping S-rank. Rose recoils in disbelief, her blue eyes wide as she realizes the impossible guiding connection has actually occurred. Startled, Rose drops her documents and blames static electricity while Azir watches her with a confused expression. Offering a polite bow and a strained smile, Rose prepares to make a quick exit from the hospital room. Rose clutches her folder tight, sweating as she wonders why her guiding only seems to manifest for Claude. A sudden, sharp whoosh of air signals a powerful presence looming behind the unsuspecting pink-haired girl in the hallway. Rose spins around in alarm as a commanding voice warns her to watch out. cutting through the silence. Her heart thumps nervously as Rose worries that her accidental guiding might have prematurely awakened the resting S-rank. Claude's gloved hand grips his own wrist firmly as he calls out Rose Valentine's name with cold precision. Claude looms over the flustered Rose, demanding to know if she is indeed the secret guide he seeks. Claude roughly pins Rose's wrists, prompting her to fear that her identity as a guide is finally exposed. Staring directly into her eyes, Claude's intense gaze leaves the small girl paralyzed and unable to look away. Claude's red eyes flare with suspicion as he accuses her of using tricks to hide her true nature. Desperate to escape, Rose urges him to seek out a professional guide who is qualified to help him. Claude maintains a firm iron grip on her arm, coldly asserting that he won't fall for the same trick twice. Standing in close proximity, Claude points out that Rose was present during both of his mysterious guiding incidents. Leaning in close, Claude asks if she expects him to believe everything is a mere coincidence as she panics. A faint, dangerous smile touches Claude's lips as he dismisses the need for any further verbal explanations from her. Rose's face flushes with heat as Claude reminds her of her own previous suggestion to verify through a kiss. Claude tilts Rose's chin upward, his gaze softening momentarily as he prepares to test her absurd theory himself. A tiny mascot appears as Claude recalls Rose's previous words about identifying a guide through direct physical contact. Rose is left breathless and frozen as Claude pulls her into a sudden, unexpectedly close and intimate embrace. Claude cradles Rose's face, commanding her to stop talking and focus entirely on him in this intense moment. Papers scatter across the floor as Claude leans down and captures Rose's lips in a surprising, deep kiss. Claude's red eyes remain focused and intense as he experiences the sensation of the kiss for the first time. Surrounded by a flourish of pink roses, the two stand locked in a romantic embrace within the sterile hallway. A steady heartbeat sounds as Rose's eyes widen in absolute shock, her mind racing during the unexpected contact. Terrified and overwhelmed, Rose fears that this intimate contact will undeniably prove her identity as his secret guide. The pair stands together in a heavy silence, the atmosphere thick with the weight of the kiss's implications. Rose blushes furiously and covers her mouth, her hand trembling as she processes the sudden turn of events. Rose tries to convince herself she should be happy, as this outcome was technically part of her plan. Claude questions her about seeing any other intruders, causing Rose to stammer in her desperate search for excuses. Rose hides her face, realizing with dread that Claude's sharp instincts mean he will never stop suspecting her. Swallowing her guilt, Rose decides she must tell another lie to maintain her safety and distance from the S-rank. Claude looks skeptical, repeating her claim that someone else was indeed present in the room earlier that day. Rose fabricates a story about bumping into a mysterious woman rushing out of the room in a great hurry. To finalize her lie, Rose describes the Phantom Guide as having short brown hair to mislead Claude's search. Rose bows her head in relief, believing that her quick thinking has finally ended the terrifying interrogation. Azir holds his equipment and informs a surprised Rose that Claude has summoned her once again today. In a playful scene, Azir pats Rose's head while she cries over her failed attempt to escape Claude's attention. Rose bids her senior farewell, lamenting her lack of power as a low-level clerk in the facility. Azir watches Rose leave with a curious expression, noting her lingering distress over the persistent black-haired man. Rose offers a sweet, polite smile of gratitude before heading off to fulfill her unavoidable duty to Claude. Walking through the facility, Rose wonders what Claude wants and dreads the new lies she must tell today. The memory of Claude's kiss lingers vividly in Rose's mind as she prepares for their next tense meeting. A quick creak sounds as Rose carefully opens the door and greets those inside with a nervous expression. Gasping in shock, Rose sees a woman with short brown hair standing confidently right next to the seated Claude. Claude adjusts his gloves with a cold, knowing look as he acknowledges Rose's arrival in the room. Rose's eyes widen as she realizes her lie has manifested into a real person standing before her eyes. Rose stares in disbelief at the brown-haired woman, who looks exactly like the person she invented. Terrified that her elaborate deception might be exposed, Rose breaks into a nervous sweat and swallows hard. Claude calls Rose into the room, prompting her to offer a shaky response as she steps inside. The brown-haired woman offers a sharp, suspicious glare that makes the atmosphere in the room feel incredibly tense. Rose feels a wave of fear wash over her as she wonders if the woman is deliberately glaring. Standing with her arms crossed, the brown-haired woman maintains a stern and unapproachable expression while watching Rose. Claude recalls Rose's previous claim about bumping into a mysterious woman before she entered the hospital room. Rose notes that while the height and hair color match her lie, the woman's hairstyle is slightly different. Claude demands a definitive answer, leaving Rose paralyzed between troubling her phantom guide or facing his further torment. The brown-haired woman, Shayna, begins to walk away as Rose utters her name with a sense of dread. Claude looks at Rose with a confused expression, clearly puzzled by her sudden recognition of the mysterious woman. Turning back, Shauna sharply tells Claude to address her directly instead of questioning the low-level clerk. Rose gasps in shock, realizing that Shauna is far more intimidating and assertive than she could have imagined. Claude remains seated as he offers a simple, cold response, agreeing to follow Shauna's lead for now. Claude stands close to Shauna, questioning if she truly was the one who performed his mysterious guiding. Shauna coyly informs Claude that he must exert significant effort if he expects to receive the answer he seeks. Claude remains silent while Shauna offers a confident smile, enjoying the upper hand she now holds over him. Rose trembles with anxiety, fearing that she has inadvertently entangled herself with a truly terrifying and powerful person. Later at a cafe, Rose sighs deeply while stirring her drink, looking completely drained from the recent ordeal. Rose continues to stir her beverage gloomily, unable to shake off the lingering stress of her failing plan. Across the room, Claude and Shayna sit together in a quiet, formal setting surrounded by a sterile atmosphere. Rose recalls their recent outings to a park, amusement park, and beach, frustrated by their constant cafe dates. Staring from a distance, Rose laments the fact that they have been consistently seen going on dates. Shanna laughs dismissively as she prepares to share a detail about a conversation she had with Claude. Claude calmly drinks from his cup while Shauna notes how well he seems to communicate with her. Rose feels a prickle of jealousy, wondering why the cold man treats Shauna so much better than her. Memories of Claude's aggressive behavior and cold threats resurface, highlighting the stark contrast in how he treats Rose. Rose complains about the unfairness of it all, suspecting Claude's germophobia is conveniently cured by a pretty face. A sudden gasp escapes Rose as she realizes someone has been standing right behind her the entire time. Rose recognizes the three handsome men, Daniel Rivendell, Wilhelm, and Rivner, who were her old favorites from the story. She watches them with confusion, questioning why such high-ranking individuals are working as simple attendants for Claude. Clearing her throat, Rose politely asks the three espers if she can inquire about their current roles. Daniel smiles broadly, explaining that Claude's handsome looks are enough to make any man admit he is cool. Wilhelm adds that fighting alongside a living legend like Claude inspires a deep sense of reverence within them. Rivner concludes that Claude's incredible abilities as an S-rank esper make him someone truly worthy of their respect. Rose stares at them with a blank expression as the reality of their motivation begins to sink in. To her utter disbelief, she realizes these formidable men are actually just obsessive, dedicated fans of Lord Claude. Rose looks skeptical, wondering how men could see a ruthless person as a dream role model for their lives. The pink-haired girl watches in surprise as the silver-haired man explains they follow Claude out of pure admiration. Daniel Rivendell looks at Rose with a gentle, concerned expression, asking if her work is becoming too tiring. Rose's eyes sparkle with excitement when Daniel offers to buy her a snack using the facility's activity budget. Abandoning her worries, Rose eagerly asks for cake, admitting she was jealous of watching others eat all day. Daniel offers a bright, charming smile and invites Rose to follow him so she can choose her favorite. Rose's eyes widen at the sight of a magnificent tower of sandwiches, macarons, and delicious strawberry-topped cakes. Taking a large bite of the cake, Rose closes her eyes in bliss as the sweet flavor melts away. Daniel chuckles at her reaction, asking if it is truly that good, while Rose enthusiastically confirms her delight. With a warm smile, Rose holds out a forkful of cake and suggests that they should all try some. A sudden love attack leaves the three men blushing and stunned by Rose's unexpected and sweet gesture of kindness. Daniel accepts the bite with a bashful hee-hee, while the group finally enjoys a peaceful moment at the table. Rose enjoys a pleasant moment at her table, unaware of the growing tension at the nearby gathering. Claude maintains a stern and watchful gaze, his red eyes focused intensely on the pink-haired clerk across the room. Shauna smiles brightly while speaking to Claude, though her attempts at conversation are met with his cold indifference. Claude complains about the noise in the cafe, his attention completely diverted by Rose as she eats with Daniel. Rose looks up in surprise, her blue eyes wide as she realizes Claude is suddenly addressing her directly. Ignoring his companion, Claude coldly commands Rose to fetch him some napkins, assuming her compliance as a lower-ranking clerk. Rose is stunned by his rude behavior, but Claude sharply warns her not to make him repeat his orders. Fuming with annoyance, Rose wonders why the cold man treats everyone else normally, but acts like a tyrant toward her. Swallowing her frustration, Rose prepares to fulfill the demand, her expression hardening as she realizes there is no escape. Claude continues his torment by demanding water as well, treating the exhausted Rose like his personal servant in public. An internal scream of rage escapes Rose as she struggles to maintain her composure under Claude's relentless and petty demands. A quick, sharp tap sounds as Rose places a mug and spoon down firmly before the demanding black-haired man. Leaning over the table in a fit of annoyance, Rose announces her immediate departure to get away from him. Rose walks away fuming, while Claude remains seated and watches her with a silent, calculating expression from his chair. Turning back to his original companion, Claude nonchalantly asks for a reminder of the conversation he had completely ignored. Shanna attempts to mask her frustration with a blush, commenting on the quality of the cake to break the silence. Blissfully distracted by her snack, Rose notes that the combination of strawberries and cream on the cake is amazing. Rose offers a friendly suggestion for the group to try the cake, and Claude surprisingly accepts with a soft thanks. A sudden, sharp movement follows as Shayna stands up abruptly, her patience clearly exhausted by Claude's lack of focus. Shayna questions Claude's true intentions, asking if he actually came to the cafe to spend time with her today. The atmosphere becomes incredibly heavy as Shauna stares down at the seated Claude, her disappointment and anger finally bubbling over. Claude offers a cold and blunt response, telling Shauna to simply say whatever is on her mind without hesitation. Deciding that the conversation is over, Shauna turns on her heel and begins to leave the cafe in a huff. Rose watches Shanna's dramatic exit with confusion, wondering why the apparent date ended so abruptly and on such bad terms. Rose's confusion turns to sudden alarm as Shauna stops right next to her table while walking toward the exit. Shanna delivers a piercing and terrifyingly silent glare that makes the atmosphere feel cold and dangerous for the startled Rose. The narrator notes that Shauna's dramatic exit that day was only the beginning of a much larger problem for Rose. A sudden, sharp clicking of heels startles Rose, signaling the arrival of a familiar and now very unwelcome presence. To Rose's absolute horror, Shauna begins visiting her workplace every single day to vent her never-ending frustrations and petty complaints. Shanna looms over Rose's desk, listing various matters regarding tripping hazards and poor noise insulation that she wants addressed immediately. Rose awkwardly scratches her head while explaining that she cannot fix the complex facility issues on such short notice. In a comedic scene, a fuming Shauna screams at a terrified Rose about how long ago the request was made. A kind male senior colleague steps in, offering to handle Shauna's complaints himself to help the overwhelmed Rose Valentine. A loud thump sounds as Shayna rejects the offer, specifically demanding that only clerk Rose Valentine handle her requests. The senior colleague quickly retreats with a nervous laugh, leaving the sweating Rose to face Shauna's wrath all alone. Sitting dejectedly at her desk, Rose wonders if her crime of eating cake that day truly deserved this harassment. Walking home later that day, Rose laments her situation, feeling as though her weekends have become public property for others. In a comedic vision, chibi versions of Claude and Shauna torment a crying Rose with tiny, sharp, devilish pitchforks. Frustrated and exhausted, Rose wonders if she should just report the both of them to the center's administration for harassment. A terrifying vision of Claude appears, his dark power surging as he mockingly asks if she truly dares report him. Rose shakes the terrifying thought away, deciding that her immediate survival is far more important than a risky formal report. Forced to join them again, Rose dreads being stuck with the pairing of the cold S-rank and the aggressive Shauna. Claude tells Rose to stay close in the crowded festival, his gaze intense as he looks back to ensure she follows. Rose exhales a weary breath, feeling the weight of the day's stress as she follows the two high-ranking individuals. Looking around the busy square, Rose checks behind her with a sense of unease while the crowd bustles around them. Rose politely inquires if Claude's usual attendants are coming today, missing the kinder presence of the other handsome espers. Claude offers a sharp, chilling look that immediately makes Rose regret asking about the absence of his dedicated fan club attendants. In a cold and final tone, Claude announces that the attendants will no longer be joining them from now on. Rose flinches in shock, terrified that she asked the wrong question and inadvertently sparked another wave of Claude's quiet anger. Realizing she is truly alone with her tormentors, Rose recalls the kindness of log number 1 and worries for herself. Shanna attempts to cling to Claude's arm while leading the way, clearly trying to initiate physical contact. Claude rejects the advance, coldly telling Shauna to keep her distance as a startled Rose watches from behind. Rose wonders about the point of their date if Claude maintains his strict no-touching rule, even with Shauna. Recalling his past hostility toward her and Oscar, Rose feels a strange relief that Claude is making an effort. The group walks through the festival grounds. With Rose, exhaustion sets in for Rose, whose stomach growls loudly as she admits she is starving after all the walking. A gloved hand suddenly extends a steaming meat and vegetable skewer toward Rose, offering a much-needed snack. Stunned, Rose points at herself and questions if the cold man is truly offering the delicious food to her. Claude's gaze remains steady as he bluntly asks if she doesn't want the food he just bought. Rose eagerly accepts the skewer with a bright smile, thanking him while she prepares to enjoy the treat. Shauna watches the exchange with a cold, resentful glare as Rose reaches out to take the food from Claude. Feeling full and satisfied, a drowsy Rose pats her stomach, though the long day is far from over. The festival continues with a mouth-watering array of street food, from grilled skewers to savory, sauce-covered takoyaki. After sampling dumplings and waffles, Rose concludes that everything she ate today was absolutely delicious. Despite the fun and food, Rose feels a sense of lingering unease as she reflects on the day's events. Rose's legs ache from walking, and she sighs wearily just as the announcement for the fireworks begins. A sudden, loud thud sounds as Rose loses her balance and stumbles in the middle of the busy crowd. Claude moves with incredible speed, catching Rose in his arms and pulling her close to prevent her fall. Brilliant fireworks explode in the night sky, illuminating the pair as they remain locked in an unexpected, close embrace. Looking down at her, the black-haired man mutters a soft remark while the festival lights shimmer around them. Claude adjusts his collar, his expression unreadable as he maintains his close proximity to the startled pink-haired girl. Rose stares up at him with wide, blushing eyes, her heart fluttering from the sudden and intense physical contact. Realizing their current position, Rose feels incredibly awkward and struggles to process the intimacy of the moment. Shanna tries once more to reach for Claude, her face full of desperation as she attempts to reclaim his attention. Claude pulls his arm back with a sharp, dismissive movement, once again refusing to let Shanna touch him. Rose clutches her chest, her breathing heavy as she tries to calm her racing heart after the close encounter. As Claude prepares to depart, Rose calls out to him, her voice filled with confusion and lingering surprise. Rose questions where Shanna went, accusing Claude of abandoning his date to seek her out instead. Claude looks away nonchalantly, stating he has no idea where Shanna went and assumes she left on her own. Rose pouts with frustration, lamenting the fact that her precious weekend was wasted on such a chaotic day. Claude tilts his head with a confused "what?" as he listens to Rose's quiet complaints about the situation. The atmosphere shifts as Claude leans in toward Rose, his intense gaze making her gasp in shock. Rose panics at their closeness, quickly stuttering that it was nothing important to avoid his piercing stare. A sudden realization stops Rose in her tracks as she recalls the strange sensation of a guiding connection. Hearts beat rapidly as the two stare at each other, the visual of a thump highlighting their shared tension. Claude continues to loom over Rose, his presence overwhelming as the world around them seems to fade away. Back at the office, an exhausted Rose drinks coffee while reeling from the sudden and unexpected guiding event. She remembers how Claude stared at her for a long time after the guiding before simply turning away. Rose recalls being swept up into Claude's arms as he announced it was time for them to return. Claude's rare, subtle smile haunts Rose's thoughts as she wishes him a safe journey back. Sitting at her desk, Rose remains completely spaced out, her mind still trapped in the memories of the festival. A sudden, loud shout from a colleague startles Rose, making her jump in her seat with a cry. Rose stares in disbelief as she is informed of her immediate transfer to the Esper Support Division. Heaving a heavy box, Rose walks through the hallway toward her new assignment, feeling the weight of the change. Rose complains about the difficulty of the work and the suddenness of her transfer to the new wing. A tall figure appears, and Rose greets Lord Claude with a mixture of shock and nervous hesitation. Rose politely asks if the room she has arrived at is his office, clutching her heavy box tightly. With a sharp tilt of his head, Claude coldly commands Rose to enter his private workspace. Rose is awestruck by the magnificent and luxurious office, her doe eyes sparkling at the fine interior design. Realization dawning, Rose sits down and concludes that she will be working much closer to Claude than expected. Rose asks Claude if she has officially become his exclusive clerk in this new assignment. Clutching her box, Rose wonders who will handle her handover while Claude sits silently nearby. Visions of delicious pies and strawberry cakes fill Rose's mind as she craves something sweet. After finishing her meal, a content chibi Rose pats her full stomach at her desk. Rose leans back comfortably, hoping this peaceful tranquility as Cloud's secretary will last forever. A sudden, sharp gasp sounds as Rose snaps awake, realizing she was caught dozing off. Claude stares back with a cold, unreadable expression that sends a chill down Rose's spine. Panicked and sweating, Rose worries that Claude will scold her for sleeping on the job. Claude turns his back, curtly ordering her to put on her coat and follow him. Rose follows him, feeling too guilty about eating all day to refuse his sudden late-night request. The pair arrives at a magnificent, high-end restaurant glowing under the warm light of sunset. Rose is awestruck by the elegance, wondering why Claude would reserve such a luxurious place. She assumes the fancy setting is intended for yet another formal date with the aggressive Shauna. As they enter the lavish interior, Rose wonders how incredible the food will actually taste. Claude takes a seat at a pristine table, his movements sharp and deliberate. He waits silently, his gaze fixed on the empty chair as a soft sound echoes. Claude looks up with a frown, asking the standing Rose why she is not sitting down. Startled, Rose explains that she assumed the seat was reserved for his usual date, Lady Shauna. A quick, impatient tapping sounds as Claude orders Rose to sit directly across from him. Rose is flabbergasted, realizing she is about to dine completely alone with the intimidating S-rank. She questions if he truly wants her to sit there, her face flushed with utter confusion. Claude's shadow looms as he bluntly asks if she refuses, making the terrified Rose sit immediately. Looking at the menu, Rose's eyes sparkle with excitement at the mention of delicious gourmet food. A waiter stands by as Rose struggles to choose between the many mouth-watering options available. Claude dismissively shuts his menu, commanding the waiter to simply bring everything listed on it. Rose is overwhelmed with joy, touched that he fulfilled a dream she only dared to imagine. An incredible feast arrives, overflowing with poultry, seafood, and a towering display of colorful macarons. While happily eating, Rose quietly thanks the mastermind for his unexpected kindness and generosity. Curiosity takes over as Rose questions why this special meal wasn't intended for Shauna. Claude takes a delicate bite, calmly telling Rose to ask whatever is on her mind. Rose nervously inquires why he chose not to dine with Lady Shauna on this evening. With a chillingly blunt tone, Claude declares that Shanna means absolutely nothing to him anymore. He stares at the food, firmly stating that Shanna is definitely not his destined guide. Rose looks at him with wide, curious eyes, wondering how he could know such a thing. Claude maintains his intense gaze and simply states that his intuition tells him the truth. Fear grips Rose as she wonders if he has already realized she was the one guiding him. Claude looks away, lamenting his failure to find a guide before his dangerous upcoming operation begins. Deeply concerned, Rose asks about the details and destination of this mysterious and sudden mission. Claude explains that he must stop a bursting gate alone, knowing he lacks guide support. A dark vision shows Claude's power surging dangerously as he admits returning safely will be difficult. A sudden, heavy silence falls as Rose stands frozen, processing the life-threatening news he just shared. Claude looks down, explaining he chose a remote location to minimize the damage of his rampage. Narration warns that an Esper's death from a power surge releases a catastrophic explosion of energy. A blinding, violent light erupts in the darkness, described as the tragic death of a star. Claude stands alone in a void, resigned to a fate that might end in his destruction. Rose stares at the table, her appetite vanishing as she wonders if this is his last supper. Claude calls the meal a final gift, compensating for the torment he caused her in the past. A sharp pang of sadness hits Rose as she looks at him with a heavy, worried heart. Later, Rose clutches a bag of leftovers, her hands trembling from the weight of his revelation. Alone in her room, Rose reflects on the original game's tragic ending and Claude's lonely, destined path. Rose gazes downward with a heavy heart, wondering if it is truly right to let Claude die. She clenches her hand tightly, terrified of the potential intimacy if Claude asks for a marking after guiding. In a moment of desperation, Chibi Rose peeks into her roommate's room to seek Eileen's advice. Eileen remains tucked under her covers, dismissively stating she is sleeping while Rose worries about being ignored. Kneeling beside the bed, Rose pleads with the rational Eileen to help her judge this difficult situation. A persistent Chibi Rose begs repeatedly for assistance, while the blonde-haired Eileen looks on with visible annoyance. Finally relenting, Eileen sighs and tells Rose to speak, prompting an enthusiastic expression of gratitude from the girl. Rose begins her story by framing it as a problem regarding a friend, while Eileen finds it predictable. Rose recalls her shifting perception of the black-haired man, moving some fear to pesky to seeing him as someone kind. She continues the tale of her friend who wishes to help a guy whose motives remain mysterious. Eileen bluntly asks if Rose is wavering in her resolve, causing the pink-haired girl to jump in shock. Sitting up in bed, Eileen points out that Claude's recent public attention toward Rose has not gone unnoticed. Eileen pokes Rose Valentine's nose, sternly warning the naive girl to stay grounded and realistic about the situation. Rose hangs her head as Eileen questions whether a powerful ruler could ever truly understand care or consideration. Crossing her arms, the blonde-haired woman declares that a man like Claude is far too much for Rose. Standing firm in her room, Eileen advises Rose to stop chasing vain dreams that only lead to trouble. Back at the office, Rose reacts with a start as she hears someone arriving and invites them inside. A brown-haired man wearing glasses and a lab coat, Senior Azir, enters the room with a friendly wave. A lavish spread of macarons and cakes sits on the desk as Rose directs her senior toward the treats. Senior Azir marvels at the food, which Rose explains were snacks Claude refused to eat earlier that day. Happily eating, Senior Azir expresses his relief that the black-haired man seems to be managing despite his condition. Laughing together, Senior Azir asks Rose to keep his rude remarks about Claude a secret, and she easily agrees. The mood shifts as Rose admits she has a serious problem, piquing the curiosity of her bespectacled senior. Rose visualizes a past guiding session, her hand resting on Claude's head as a shimmering energy flows. Senior Azir reveals he already suspected her secret and chose to stay silent to protect her interests. Rose realizes the danger of her secret, knowing she would be apprehended if her guiding abilities were exposed. A fearful chibi Rose imagines herself locked in a dark cage under the watchful, stern gaze of Claude. Leaning closer, Senior Azir asks Rose to reveal the true heart of the problem weighing on her mind. Rose admits that she has been spending a significant amount of time close to the intimidating Claude lately. A sudden, intense blush covers Rose's face as she struggles to articulate the feelings she has developed. Chibi Senior Azir smiles knowingly, teasingly asking if she has actually started liking Claude more than she intended. Quickly changing the subject, Rose asks if there is any way she can help Claude before his mission. A dark vision of a bloodied and defeated Claude haunts her thoughts, fueling her desperate need to intervene. Rose asks if she can secretly guide him, her eyes filled with determination to save him from fate. Senior Azir looks at her with a soft expression and agrees to help her with a plan. Claude reflects on his agonizing life, lamenting the exhaustion of relying on suppressants just to survive the day. The S-Class Esper, Claude Dunhart, recalls being a man blessed by the gods, yet burdened by a curse. Born into a prestigious lineage of Espers, young Claude had lived a life completely devoid of failure. Everything changed when he manifested his powers as he realized a terrible curse had begun to take hold. He explains his rare condition, where touching a guide causes extreme physical pain instead of providing relief. Scientists and his father watch through glass as they once tried to force him to receive guiding support. The failed attempt left Claude with severe trauma, causing him to deeply loathe even the simplest human contact. He describes the sensation of his senses spiraling out of control in a dark world swallowed by chaos. In a moment of absolute despair, Claude clutched the ground and wished for death rather than continued suffering. Panting and covered in sweat, he wonders how long he can endure living in such a miserable state. Rose prepares to act, holding a dark gem while telling herself to move slowly and gently with him. The scene focuses on Claude's face, his eyes closed in a deep sleep as the plan begins. Remembering the instructions given by Senior Azir, Rose cautiously peeks around the door to find her target. Azir explains that the large dose of suppressants will create the perfect opportunity for Rose to sneak in. Stepping into the room, Rose hopes to ease her guilt by guiding him while her senior provides cover. Claude sleeps peacefully while Rose prepares to guide him in secret to ease his suffering. Reaching out, Rose cautiously touches Claude's hand as she begins her unauthorized attempt at guiding. Panic sets in for Rose as she realizes she lacks any actual knowledge on the guiding process. Chibi Rose attempts a literal energy blast of power, but the clumsy effort ends in immediate failure. Closing her eyes, prays desperately for a miracle, only to meet another disappointing failure. Stepping closer, she tries a gentler approach by reaching out to touch the black-haired man's forehead. Frustration boils over as Rose clutches her head, lamenting her total ignorance regarding how to guide him. Looking down at the sleeping Claude, Rose stands in somber silence, weighed down by her inability to help. Rose leans in close, her eyes searching Claude's face as she tries to find a solution. She believes she has found the answer, yet a lingering doubt tells her it is still imperfect. Determined, Chibi Rose considers repeatedly attempting her guiding method until she finally achieves the desired result. A soft, glowing kiss serves as a desperate final effort to transfer her guiding energy to him. Wide-eyed and shocked, Rose stares blankly as she processes the intimacy of her sudden, bold action. Her hand is pinned down as she lets out a muffled, surprised sound of distress. Claude awakens suddenly, grasping Rose's chin and catching her completely off guard with his intense, waking gaze. Eileen stands sternly with crossed arms while Rose attempts to hide behind the blonde woman's shadow. Claude reflects internally on the persistent thoughts of the pink-haired woman that continue to haunt his mind. Rose reacts with a start, her attention drawn by something unexpected occurring just out of sight. Claude reviews a formal civilian file for Rose Valentine, confirming her identity as an ordinary citizen. Clasping his head, Claude struggles with his growing obsession and his deep-seated desire to touch her. Alone in bed, Rose gazes upward with a troubled heart, reflecting on the complexity of their situation. Claude recalls a past meeting, driven by an unfamiliar and compelling feeling he had never experienced before. He remembers pulling her close into an embrace, keeping a watchful and protective eye over her. Claude realizes that simple observation of Rose's bubbly antics is insufficient to uncover the truth about her. Oscar listens as a memory of a past dangerous encounter with Claude is brought back to light. Panic flares in Oscar as he questions whether Claude's past actions were fueled by genuine romantic feelings. Losing his patience, Claude lifts the frantic Azir off the ground by his clothes as the scientist screams. Desperate to escape Claude's wrath, Azir shifts the blame entirely onto Rose, calling her the true culprit. Oscar looks on with absolute bewilderment, questioning the strange and chaotic scene unfolding right before him. Turning his sharp gaze toward the new arrival, Claude acknowledges Oscar's presence with a cool greeting. The two men take their seats, prepared to discuss a matter of significant importance in private. Seeking a fresh perspective, Claude asks Oscar for romantic advice to better understand Rose's evasive behavior. Oscar suggests a plan to ease her fears, warning Claude that the proposed method will be unpleasant. Claude declares his absolute resolve, willing to endure anything if it means keeping Rose by his side. An elaborate plan to deceive Rose begins, utilizing Shauna as a decoy to lower the girl's guard. Claude reflects on how he slowly approached her, using simple gestures like food to gain her trust. Memories of shared meals and group gatherings flash by as he continues his calculated pursuit of her. Standing tall, Claude recalls handling various obstacles with ease to clear the path toward his goal. The black-haired man stares deeply into Rose's eyes, his focus entirely consumed by the pink-haired girl. Claude discusses a risky plan involving disgusting drugs to stage a raid and manipulate the situation. He firmly rejects any reckless options, determined not to repeat the same failures of his past. Oscar sighs in exasperation, calling Claude hopeless for his stubborn and overly cautious approach to love. Resigned to the plan, Claude endures the sensation of the potent drug surging through his entire body. Rose leans in close as Claude mentally declares his intention to endure the pain for his guide. Tenderness fills the moment as Rose gently touches Claude's hair, unaware that he is currently awake. Fear takes over as Rose is caught red-handed, anticipating a harsh scolding for her secret actions. Claude looms over the kneeling Rose, sternly commanding her to take her punishment seriously and stop being lazy. Chibi Rose cries out in frustration, wondering why Claude happened to be awake at that exact moment. Trembling with nerves, Rose asks how much longer she must maintain her current, uncomfortable position. Claude watches her with a piercing stare, declaring she must stay until she fully understands her mistake. Chibi Rose looks utterly lost, questioning what mistake Claude means as her mind races with countless possibilities. Claude asks why Rose hid the fact that she was the one who guided him that day. Chibi Rose realizes her secret protected her from being killed by the game's mastermind, but remains silent. Claude leans in close and firmly holds Rose's chin, trapping her under his intense and searching gaze. A look of pure shock crosses Rose's face as her heart hammers against her ribs from the closeness. Claude suggests Rose likes another Esper, causing her cheeks to burn with an uncontrollable, deep red blush. Narrowing her eyes, Rose wonders if Claude is actually feeling jealous, sensing a strange shift in him. Claude places his hands on Rose's shoulders, a sudden and firm gesture that leaves her feeling trapped. Chibi Rose imagines Claude strangling her, reinforcing her desperate need to avoid his potentially lethal attention. Trembling, Rose admits her lack of knowledge about guiding, feeling helpless because she cannot control her power. Claude dismisses her worries, while a Chibi Rose reacts with an audible, confused, "Huh?" at his nonchalance. Clasping his gloved hands together, Claude declares they will simply keep trying until her guiding finally works. Rose is struck by total disbelief, her heart pounding as she asks him to clarify his shocking suggestion. Claude explains the first step of his plan as a dark, oppressive aura begins to loom over Rose. Radiating a mysterious, glowing energy, Claude smiles while preparing to reveal the next stage of their partnership. Rose's eyes widen in absolute horror as she processes the true meaning of Claude's imprinting proposal. Silhouettes illustrate the permanent bond of imprinting, which grants an Esper and Guide exclusive rights to one another. Chibi Rose panics while a demon-winged Claude prepares to stamp an imprint registration form, sealing her fate. Rose's hands tremble as she realizes imprinting requires spending a night together, a reality she cannot face. Horrified, Rose watches Claude unbutton his coat, refusing to pledge her life away on such a whim. Claude suggests they live together instead, causing Rose to blush deeply and stutter in her confusion. A smug, satisfied smile spreads across Claude's face as he observes Rose's frantic and bashful reaction. Walking on the grass, a quick "wow" escapes Rose as she wonders if they are heading to his house. Her eye sparkles with newfound hope as she realizes living with a wealthy man has certain perks. Arriving at the modern estate, Rose is awestruck by the sheer luxury of Claude's massive private residence. Chibi Rose celebrates the idea of staying in a fancy home while they live together. As a hand reaches for the door handle, Rose wonders if the interior is modern and chic. Stepping inside, Rose freezes in place, her face drained of color at the sight before her. The house is cold and completely empty, leading Rose to question if anyone actually lives in such a void. Claude offers to furnish the place for her, delighting Rose, who admits her passion for interior design. Lounging on an expensive bed, Rose basks in the comfort of what she calls heaven on earth. Rose compares Claude's self-sufficient cleaning to her old roommate Eileen's constant nagging about household chores. Claude bans her from the office, insisting she work remotely from a designated seat in his home. Surrounded by flowers, Rose beams with joy at achieving her dream of a lazy and comfortable life. Her peace is interrupted by the sound of someone approaching, signaling that dinner is ready. A lavish feast sits before Rose as she enthusiastically prepares to enjoy the meal Claude provided. Closing her eyes in pure bliss, Rose chews happily and savors every delicious bite of the food. Claude watches her with a satisfied look, pleased that she is enjoying the meal he prepared. Rose sparkles with curiosity, wondering why Claude is content to just watch her eat instead of joining. Claude laughs and claims he isn't hungry, while Rose looks at him with growing suspicion. Staring at a piece of meat on her fork, Rose suspects Claude has a hidden, dark motive. Rose suddenly accuses Claude of trying to fatten her up like a pig to make her ugly. Claude stares back with a stunned and bewildered expression, completely caught off guard by her wild logic. Rose imagines Claude rejecting a pig version of herself, fearing he wants to ensure no one else wants her. Claude covers his face to hide his laughter, finding Rose's ridiculous and wild imagination incredibly funny. Claude's face softens as he laughs openly, his gaze turning warm and genuinely amused by her antics. Chibi Rose remains confused, unable to fathom why he keeps feeding her if her theory is wrong. Feeling uneasy, Rose pushes away from the table and declares she is done eating for the day. A beautiful strawberry cake is suddenly presented, its sweet appearance designed to shatter her resolve. Rose's eyes pop with shock as she recognizes a famous, hard-to-get cake she has always wanted to try. Rose begrudgingly accepts the offer while happily munching on her food with a satisfied expression. Claude offers the delicious strawberry cake, which Rose enjoys immensely after declaring the treat entirely innocent. Claude feeds Rose a piece of cake as she reflects on how remarkably handsome he looks in this moment. Rose wonders why Claude continues to treat her with increasing kindness despite her lazy behavior. Watching him from behind, Rose realizes she may eventually feel guilty for acting so cold toward him. A moment of quiet reflection passes between the two as they stand side by side in their shared residence. Rose asks Claude if her lifestyle is acceptable, expressing concern over her inconsistent and unreliable guiding abilities. Claude admits his dislike for lazy slackers, causing Rose to recoil with a sudden, sharp pang of worry. Claude gently touches Rose's face, reassuring her that their current living arrangement is perfectly fine with him. A spark of success flares as Rose's guiding suddenly activates while Claude holds her close. Claude leans toward Rose, intensifying the atmosphere as she breathlessly calls out his name. A passionate kiss ensues, and Rose realizes that the physical contact is making her guiding energy surge with strength. Claude's fingers linger softly against Rose's ear, further fueling the growing connection between Esper and Guide. Rose's cheeks flush a deep red as she experiences the overwhelming intensity of Claude's close proximity. Overwhelmed by the sensation, Rose realizes she has never felt such a massive and potent amount of guiding before. Stunned into silence, Rose gazes up with wide eyes as she processes the sudden and powerful shift in her powers. Claude calls Rose by name and says she is entertaining, his face softening with a look of genuine amusement. A lavishly prepared steak dinner sits ready, adding to the luxury of Rose's new lifestyle. Claude stands confidently, observing the scene with a smug yet satisfied expression on his face. Rose clutches her head in frustration, desperately trying to figure out the specific trigger for her elusive guiding power. While Claude seems to have understood the secret to their success, Rose remains completely in the dark. Under the guise of practicing her guiding, Rose finds herself unable to avoid Claude's constant and deliberate physical contact. Feeling his warm touch against her skin, Rose admits to herself that she is slowly starting to enjoy his attention. Conflicted by her emotions, Rose questions if she has truly grown attached to the man she once feared. Rose reminds herself that despite the sweet cohabitation, Claude is ultimately the dangerous final villain of her story. Fear lingers in the back of her mind, worrying that his cruel true nature could resurface at any moment. Gazing into each other's eyes, Rose considers the possibility that they might actually be able to coexist together. Determination fills Rose as she resolves to quickly uncover the secret method behind her guiding power. Steeling herself for the task ahead, Rose prepares to investigate the mysteries of her own abilities. After managing to pull away from a clingy Claude, Rose insists on having some much-needed personal time. Rose gathers a heavy stock of academic books, hoping they contain the answers she seeks about guiding. Clad in a comfortable green hoodie, Rose feels optimistic about her upcoming research into her unique condition. Exhaustion quickly sets in, and a sudden thud sounds as Rose collapses onto the floor amidst her research materials. To her dismay, Rose discovers that not a single record or document describes a condition similar to her own. Feeling utterly defeated and lost, Rose wonders what her next step should be in this confusing situation. Rose tearfully questions how Claude could possibly understand her powers when she, the person involved, knows nothing at all. Her weeping is interrupted when a familiar and unexpected voice suddenly calls out to her. Rose's eyes widen as she recognizes the blonde woman, Irene, standing before her in the library. Chibi Rose clings to Irene while sobbing, desperately begging the blonde woman to listen to her many troubles. Rose reflects on how long she and Claude have been living together as she prepares to explain the situation. Irene reacts with calm indifference to the news, leaving a shocked Rose wondering why she isn't more surprised. Irene admits she already had a rough idea about the situation, showcasing her sharp and observant nature. Irene bluntly points out that Rose is terrible at hiding secrets, suggesting that Claude likely knew the truth long ago. Irene's harsh honesty feels like a dagger to Rose's heart, but the blonde woman quickly shifts focus to the problem. Rose confesses her fears about becoming Claude's guide, worrying that he will discard her once she is no longer useful. Despite Irene's cold demeanor, Rose hopes her friend's sharp intellect will provide the guidance she desperately needs. Irene's blunt response to Rose's dilemma elicits a loud and startled exclamation of shock from the pink-haired girl. Irene points out that Rose's previous complaints sounded like relationship counseling, questioning her current dramatic display of hatred. Rose frantically argues that everything has changed now that Claude finally knows her true identity as his guide. Panic seizes Rose as she realizes that their current path may lead to the permanent and terrifying bond of imprinting. Irene looks completely stunned, sweat pouring down her face as she imagines an inappropriate scenario involving her friend. Desperate and terrified, Rose begs Irene to stay, reaching out as the blonde woman begins to walk away. Looking at a large clock on the wall, Rose panics upon realizing she promised Claude she would return by lunch. Walking away dejectedly, a slumped chibi Rose laments her lack of success in finding any answers about her powers. Rose stops in her tracks, blinking in surprise as she spots the blonde man, Daniel, standing nearby. Holding a large white gift box tied with a red ribbon, Daniel warmly greets Rose at the estate entrance. Rose's eyes sparkle with realization as she looks at the fancy cake, discovering that Daniel has been providing her snacks. Excited by the presence of a friend, Rose invites Daniel inside to join them for a meal and conversation. A sudden, loud bam sounds as a firm hand grips the door handle, and a deep voice calls for Rose. Claude looms in the doorway, his eyes narrowed in anger as he demands to know why she was gone for hours. Rose trembles with fear, her face paling as she realizes that Claude is genuinely furious with her for being late. Claude coldly addresses Daniel, mockingly questioning if he also has time to waste by idling around the property. Panicked, Rose rushes toward Claude to explain the situation while a startled Daniel stands awkwardly in the background. The atmosphere grows even more tense as Claude questions if Rose has already given Daniel an affectionate pet name. Claude dismisses Daniel with a sharp command to leave the cake and get lost, leaving no room for argument. Daniel flees the scene in a panic while Rose shouts after him, terrified of being left alone with Claude. Before she can run, a firm hand reaches out and grabs the hood of Rose's green sweater from behind. Claude drags a protesting Rose toward the house, her feet sliding along the ground as she shouts in distress. Rose shudders with fear, wondering if she has been blacklisted and will be permanently barred from leaving the house. Standing tall, Claude sternly orders Rose to go inside immediately as he continues to haul her along by her hood. A dark and heavy atmosphere settles over the scene, punctuated by an ominous, low-frequency sound vibrating through the air. Rose sits on the couch, head bowed in submission, while an intimidating Claude stands over her in heavy silence. Gazing up at him with wide eyes, Rose feels a sense of confusion and dread about his next move. A flashback reveals a younger Claude leading a mission where older Espers disrespected him and ignored his tactical orders. Younger Claude is shown standing over the tied-up rebels, explaining how he gave them a final stern warning. The betrayal continued as the other Espers ambushed him in his bed just a few nights after his warning. A terrifying scene depicts how Claude tied his attackers up and threw them into a mutant den to be killed. Horror washes over Rose's face as she listens to the brutal story, her mouth hanging open in total shock. The narrative text explains that after such a public and violent example, no one ever dared defy Claude again. Claude smirks down at her, noting that it has been a long time since anyone dared to rebel against him. Leaning closer with an intense and predatory gaze, Claude makes Rose feel even more vulnerable and trapped. Rose's mind races as she fears her only options left are to be permanently imprinted or meet a grim end. A loud siren suddenly blares through the house as a red system notification announces that a code black has been declared. Claude's face turns deadly serious, his eyes glowing as he curses the sudden and dangerous escalation of events. Confusion flickers across Rose's face as she asks for clarification on what a code black actually signifies. Dark energy swirls around a gate as dragon-like mutants emerge, representing a nationwide disaster-level threat. Images of burning buildings flash by, recounting the tragic history of the last Code Black 14 years ago. A group of men in dark suits stand together, representing the forces that must respond to such extreme emergencies. The persistent alarm continues to ring, its shrill sound emphasizing the immediate danger facing the entire capital. Claude prepares for battle, telling Rose that her current situation is nothing compared to the chaos unfolding outside. As Claude walks toward the door, Rose watches him leave with a surprising and deep sense of worry. Pausing for a brief second, Claude places a gloved hand on Rose's shoulder, looking back at her one last time. Claude issues a final threat regarding her staying inside, but Rose defiantly calls him a monster to his face. Standing alone in the large, quiet house, Rose clutches herself, feeling a strange void now that Claude is gone. Guilt prickles at her heart as she regrets not wishing him luck, fearing she may never see him again. Shaking her head to clear her thoughts, Rose tells herself to focus on her own survival and comfort. Her attention is drawn to the glowing intercom screen, making her wonder who could be visiting during the crisis. A brown-haired man wearing glasses and a lab coat appears on the monitor, and Rose recognizes him as Azir. Opening the door, Rose looks up at her senior colleague in shock, questioning why he has come to the house. Azir, the brown-haired man in a lab coat, urgently tells Rose to run while Claude is away. Confusion fills Rose as she questions the sudden need to flee during a dangerous Code Black alert. Azir reveals with a wink that he faked the emergency alarm just to lure Claude out of the house. Rose is horrified by Azir's reckless stunt, realizing why the surrounding area felt so unnervingly calm. Azir justifies his risky plan, claiming it was the only way to get the monster away from the house. Rose remains skeptical, questioning why he would go to such extreme lengths to pull this stunt. Looking back at Rose, Azir asks for her trust as he prepares to lead her away. Azir notices Rose's swollen face and assumes Claude has been physically abusing her, causing a deep misunderstanding. Rose attempts to deflect the concern, privately worrying that her lazy habits and salty snacks are showing. Azir internally pities Rose, convinced she is making up excuses to hide the truth about Claude's cruelty. Panicked, Rose frantically tries to clear the misunderstanding as they continue their urgent escape. Azir clutches his head in distress, proclaiming that he is also a victim of Claude's terrifying behavior. Azir continues his emotional outburst, reminding Rose that his upcoming wedding was ruined because of the man. A memory shows his dark-haired fiancé calling off their wedding after discovering his hidden hair loss. Azir warns Rose that Claude is manipulating her, just as he has manipulated everyone else around him. Rose is doubtful, noting that while Claude threatens her, she can't imagine him truly tricking her. Azir reveals Claude's deeper conspiracy, showing a flashback of Claude pinning a colleague named Oscar against a wall. Rose is stunned as Azir explains that Claude and Oscar schemed together to make her drop her guard. Azir confesses he was forced to leak her info after Claude used dark magic to threaten him. Azir urges Rose to flee with him immediately to escape the dangerous web Claude has woven. Doubt poisons Rose's mind as she wonders if Claude's gentle smiles were all part of an act. She remembers Claude's tender gaze and soft expressions, now questioning if they were entirely fake. A peaceful memory of sharing dessert makes Rose wonder if their entire cohabitation was based on lies. Realization washes over Rose as she looks up, her face a mask of shock and betrayal. Azir takes Rose's hands in his, pleading for her to trust him and follow his lead. A close-up reveals Azir's earnest expression behind his glasses as he waits for her final answer. Azir reinforces his plea, telling Rose to simply follow him to safety and freedom. Looking directly at her, Azir's gaze is steady and hopeful as he waits for her choice. Resentment builds within Rose as she decides to stop obeying the man who bullied and lied to her. Rose firmly grasps Azir's hands, deciding to put her trust in her senior colleague and move forward. The scene shifts to the city exterior as the sun sets over the buildings during a guide call. Azir and Rose stand before an official in the Guided Rights Protection Committee office, tension thick in the air. Azir loudly declares to the room that Rose is an unregistered guide being mistreated by the center. The woman at the desk reacts with helplessness, admitting there is little the organization can actually do. Azir rants about everyone's fear of Claude, questioning why they all worship such a dangerous individual. A group of espers in dark uniforms gathers at the door, drawn by the loud shouting in the hallway. Azir's anger boils over as Rose watches the situation escalate into a public scene. Noticing the gathering crowd, a worried Rose begs Azir to calm down and lower his voice. Azir gets a glint in his eye, realizing the crowd provides a perfect chance to make the scandal public. Shouting to everyone present, Azir accuses Claude Dunhart of exploiting an unregistered guide for his own benefit. He claims Claude kidnapped and monopolized her, while a terrified Rose begs him to stop the public display. The espers begin whispering among themselves, acknowledging rumors that Claude had a hidden guide locked away somewhere. One man notes how Claude has looked refreshed lately while other espers struggle to receive any guiding. The gathered espers begin to protest, demanding that the center resolve this perceived discrimination immediately. Rose is overwhelmed and humiliated as she stands before the staring, whispering crowd of curious espers. Humiliation intensifies for Rose as she is treated like a spectacle and forced to undergo a guiding test. Rose tries to reassure herself, hoping that becoming an official guide will end Claude's threats once and for all. A researcher in a lab coat instructs Rose to place her hand on a glowing purple orb. The purple orb radiates a magical glow as it prepares to measure Rose's unique guiding potential. Compatibility results appear on floating panels, showing one exceptionally high result of 51% for a specific Esper. Rose gazes at the purple orb, preparing for the test that will decide her fate as a guide. Sitting beside Azir, Rose hopes the test will resolve her complicated situation with Claude once and for all. Rose remembers Claude's intense physical closeness, wondering if her choice to flee was truly the right one. Startled but determined, Rose confirms her readiness to begin the official guiding compatibility test. Her fingers tremble slightly as she reaches out to touch the glowing purple orb for the first time. The surrounding crowd of Espers whispers in anticipation, doubting if Rose truly possesses the power of a guide. A heavy silence falls as the crowd parts, reacting with shock to an authoritative command to step aside. Claude stands tall in his dark uniform, his crimson eyes cold as he makes a dramatic and unexpected appearance. Shock washes over Rose as she realizes Claude found her far faster than she ever anticipated. Claude walks toward Rose with an intimidating presence, calling out her name as everyone else watches in silence. Azir steps in front of Rose, bravely ordering Claude to stay back and stop exploiting his junior colleague. A blast of purple energy erupts as Claude tosses Azir aside, leaving Rose horrified as her lifeline vanishes. Trembling on her stool, Rose feels a sense of utter despair, wondering how she will survive this confrontation. A sudden realization strikes Rose, her eyes widening as she faces the man she tried so hard to escape. To everyone's shock, the imposing Claude drops to one knee before Rose in a surprising show of humility. Gazing up at her with a steady look, Claude's sudden change in behavior leaves Rose deeply confused and wary. Claude questions Rose's true feelings, asking if she was genuinely worried about him during the fake emergency. Looking down at the floor, Rose realizes that Claude has already deduced that the entire alarm was a ruse. She feels a pang of guilt, knowing Claude rushed back to the house in a panic just for her. The crowd begins to murmur, recognizing Rose by name and gossiping about her being Claude's long-hidden guide. Claude stares at her intently, asking if she truly intended to leave him of her own free will. Rose remains silent, her heart heavy with conflict as she processes Claude's earnest tone and vulnerable posture. Claude's expression softens for a brief moment, hinting at an emotional depth that Rose had never seen before. Rose grapples with the betrayal of Azir's claims, wondering if Claude truly orchestrated everything to trap her. Before the entire crowd, Claude offers a sincere apology for his past cruelty and the lies he told her. Stunned, Rose watches as the most feared Esper in the country bows before her, pleading for another chance. Claude admits his desperation for a guide led him to make terrible mistakes, acknowledging the pain he caused. Claude makes a final plea. If she tests as his highest match, she must return to his side. The watching Espers are dumbfounded, unable to believe that the arrogant Claude Dunhart would humble himself so publicly. Rose studies Claude's serious face, wondering if his heart is truly in the words he is speaking now. Her reflection ripples in the purple orb as Rose wonders how to proceed in this high-stakes moment. Claude remains silent, his gaze never wavering as he waits for Rose to make her ultimate decision. Rose decides to proceed with the test, telling herself she must see the results to find a way forward. Touching the orb, Rose desperately hopes that she isn't a perfect match for the man kneeling before her. Azir looks on in confusion as the orb fails to respond, announcing that no guiding waves are appearing. Panicked, Rose suddenly remembers that her unique guiding power cannot be activated through simple physical contact alone. The crowd scoffs, believing her claims were a lie, while Claude looks on with a knowing, subtle smirk. Rose stands up in frustration, insisting that her unique traits are the reason for the failed test results. The other Espers look away, their skeptical expressions showing they no longer believe in her abilities. Humiliation burns in Rose's cheeks as she faces the collective doubt of the entire testing room. Desperate to prove herself, Rose offers to provide guiding immediately to demonstrate her true potential. The chibi-style Espers whisper about her status, still unsure if she is truly Claude's fated guide or not. Rose feels isolated and betrayed, realizing that the other Espers are too terrified of Claude to help her. To her surprise, Claude smiles warmly and begins to pull off his white gloves to assist her. Rose is shocked by the gesture, knowing that Claude's gloves are a vital part of his combat uniform. She realizes with a start that she still doesn't fully understand the specific conditions required to trigger her guiding. As Claude takes her hand, Rose looks at him in total confusion, wondering what he is planning next. Claude brings her hand toward his face, his intense gaze focused entirely on her as the atmosphere shifts. Rose stares back, her face flushing as the physical proximity and Claude's intensity overwhelm her senses. In an embarrassed panic, Rose wonders if Claude has truly lost his mind in front of the entire crowd. The purple orb glows intensely as Rose's touch successfully triggers a powerful and undeniable guiding reaction. A bashful chibi Rose hopes this display of power is enough to satisfy the demanding crowd around her. Watching Claude, Rose feels a heavy guilt for her previous lies and wonders why he continues helping her. As a quick tap sounds from the keyboard, Azir stares at the monitor, baffled by the incredible results. Azir announces the shocking news. Rose's matching rate with over half the center's espers exceeds 60%. The room erupts in skeptical murmurs as the other espers struggle to believe such an unprecedented compatibility score. Rose's eyes widen in sheer disbelief, her mind racing as she grapples with the reality of her newfound status. Historically, a 60% match signifies a fated lifelong partner, a rarity far beyond the usual average rates. Realizing she is now a coveted prize, Rose fears every esper will become desperate to claim her for themselves. Looking at her hands, Rose reflects on her simple desire for freedom and her fear of Claude's control. Azir's expression turns grave as he prepares to reveal an even more staggering detail from the compatibility test. A decorative panel displays the ultimate bombshell. Claude Dunhart shares a near-perfect 97% matching rate with Rose. Rose is left completely breathless, her face flushing as she confirms the impossible 97% synchronization with Claude. Azir confirms that this historic result is the first of its kind, leaving the entire room in stunned silence. While other guides look on with envy, the male espers view Rose as the ultimate, most coveted prize. Overwhelmed by the chaotic turn of events, Rose feels lost and desperately wishes to escape this suffocating public situation. Claude's intense gaze remains fixed on Rose as he gently takes her hand, radiating an aura of possessive calm. Two indignant espers shout protests, refusing to let even an S-class like Claude monopolize such a powerful guide. In a frantic scene, the surrounding men demand their right to use Rose's guiding, treating her like a resource. Horrified at being called an object, Rose is relieved when Claude sternly defends her dignity against the greedy crowd. Claude looks down at the protesting men, his expression hardening as he prepares to settle the matter once and for all. A sudden thump-thump of her heart echoes as Rose stares into Claude's eyes, feeling an unexpected deep connection. With a firm grab, Claude's hand closes over Rose's, sealing their connection as a brilliant light begins to emanate. Standing amidst a floral aura, the two share a moment of intense synchronization that leaves Rose visibly stunned and breathless. A soft, genuine smile finally graces Rose's face as the warmth of the successful guiding washes over her heart. Azir abruptly interrupts the intimate moment with a sharp cough, his face pale and eyes full of lingering resentment. A sudden clack of footsteps draws everyone's attention as a new, authoritative presence enters the tense testing room. Looking battered and bloodied, Azir desperately pleads for Rose's help to finally bring down the formidable Claude Dunhart. Furious at the escalation, Rose realizes Azir's reckless schemes almost ruined everything, her anger burning like a literal fire. Claude ignores the drama, calmly stating that he will respect Rose's choices despite the pressures from those around them. With a rhythmic tap-tap, an imposing figure approaches, his footsteps echoing a warning through the silent, crowded hallway. A commanding voice orders Claude to release Rose, causing the gathered crowd to whisper in fear and recognition. The center's chief of security arrives, his scarred face and blonde hair marking him as a high-ranking power. Rose trembles, recognizing the security force as the strongest espers and realizing the gravity of the legal accusations. The chief officially charges Claude with kidnapping and illegal confinement, ignoring the esper's cold and unbothered expression. A stern warning follows as the chief declares the entire matter will be referred to an emergency trial immediately. Behind the scenes, Azir wears a twisted, vengeful smile, relishing the thought of Claude finally being punished for his actions. Rose is struck by a sense of betrayal, realizing Azir manipulated the situation without ever consulting her own wishes. Claude pulls Rose closer to his side, his protective stance a silent challenge to the authorities standing before him. Looking the chief directly in the eye, Claude questions the legal basis of the trial with terrifyingly calm confidence. Claude turns the tables, demanding the arrest of the man who raised a false, high-priority alarm at his residence. The crowd gasps as the truth about the black-grade false alarm spreads, casting immediate doubt on Azir's credibility. Rose looks up at Claude in confusion, wondering what his next move will be in this high-stakes legal battle. A sudden snap of energy resonates as Claude prepares to take action, his power rippling through the stagnant air. The security chief reaches out a hand in warning, ordering Claude to stay put until the situation is resolved. With a sudden whoosh, Claude sweeps Rose up into his arms, intending to leave the scene regardless of orders. Rose clings to Claude as he carries her away, her body trembling from the overwhelming intensity of the confrontation. Within the safety of his embrace, Claude whispers a gentle reassurance that she is finally safe from the chaos. Later, Rose finds herself in a quiet room, softly apologizing to Claude for the trouble her presence has caused. Drawing her into a tight hug, Claude asks for a moment of peace, his heart finally exposed to her. Rose is startled as a rhythmic thump sounds from her heart while Claude draws her into a sudden, intimate embrace. Amidst the warm embrace, Rose realizes her physical proximity to Claude might actually allow her to provide him with guiding. A frantic heartbeat fills the air as Rose remains frozen in Claude's arms, overwhelmed by the unexpected physical contact. Looking up at him, Rose's heart continues its steady thump as the intensity of the moment leaves her breathless. Claude looks down at Rose with rare vulnerability, admitting he is still clumsy when it comes to navigating many things. Reflecting on his past, Claude reveals his ego was still unformed when he first entered the harsh Esper Center. He admits that his environment taught him to interact with others only through cold suppression and absolute unwavering control. Claude describes Rose as unpredictable, admitting he feared losing her like a fading dream if he even blinked once. His cheeks flushing slightly, Claude confesses that his only instinct was to hold Rose as close to him as possible. The two stand in silence, the heavy weight of Claude's honest admission hanging palpably in the quiet, dimly lit room. Rose looks at him with wide, shimmering eyes, stunned that the feared Claude is finally sharing his most sincere feelings. Seizing the moment, Rose demands an apology for past chores, and Claude demands a Claude. Surprisingly, complies with a humble, quiet response. In a playful chibi scene, Rose extracts another apology for his past threats of throwing her into mutant dens. Finding the situation subtly amusing, Rose wonders what other demands she can make while Claude remains in this repentant mood. A sudden realization strikes Rose, and she speaks up as Claude looks on with a confused, questioning expression. Recalling a round pink pig, Rose suspects the gourmet food was a plot to increase her guiding surface area. Claude stands frozen in sheer disbelief, his face a mask of shock at Rose's bizarre and creative weight gain theory. Chibi Rose animatedly explains how gaining weight would theoretically make her an easier target for his constant guiding needs. Claude begins to chuckle at her wild imagination, while Rose remains earnest in her ridiculous, wide-eyed questioning of him. Claude playfully questions the logic of her theory, his amusement evident as he shifts his stance toward her again. With a sudden sweep, Claude lifts Rose into his arms, teasingly suggesting they check exactly how much she's gained. Her face turning a deep crimson, Rose frantically demands to be put down as Claude carries her away.